So, Shelly, I'm going to ask you the same questions that I asked Veronica that I now don't completely remember, so they probably won't be exactly the same. Maybe I need to write those down. But how do you feel based on, because you've read the book, how do you feel I did on being accurate and truthful to the dynamic of our hometown, to the experiences that we would have had growing up? How did I do? Unpacking Mormonism and other religious trauma is meant for educational purposes only. Hello and welcome back to Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma. I'm your host, Sarah Westbrook, joined today by some band nerds. Are we nerds or geeks? Mason says geeks. Mason's in the background. Mason, come closer so you can share our microphone here. Mason's over there yelling. I'm like, babe, really, we cannot hear you, so come closer.
I think, was it, I don't remember.
I think it's geeks, actually.
Is it geeks?
Band geeks?
It is.
Oh.
I wasn't just being ornery, it's geeks.
Know it all.
Coming from someone who was never in the band, so, you know, I know.
You were never in the band?
He was in the choir.
So, am I using your real name? I am, right?
Okay,
Okay, so Shelly, in order for us to hear what you're saying, you have to, like, make out with the microphone.
I have to, like, smash my face. Okay, sweet.
Yeah, like you
Not
need to be
quite,
about
but
an
very
inch or two away from that mic. Otherwise, it won't pick you up.
Every time.
So,
So you basically have to
I am the first chair flute talking to the clarinet section.
I think I was probably last chair because my
No,
mom
I
made
think
me
I was
be.
last chair.
My mom made me be in
Were
the
you
clarinet
really,
section
Ronnie?
because I did not want to be in it. so
Talk in the microphone. We're
I
missing
did
all
not.
this.
I did not want to be in the band, but my mom made me. So I talked the teacher. I almost said his name into letting me play bass clarinet.
Mr.
So,
Douglas.
yeah, so I could pretend like I was playing, but I wasn't.
Shut up. Oh my gosh, I love that so much.
I love that so much. Okay, so I am a huge rebel at heart. However, Shelly, your rebellion rivals mine tenfold. Am I wrong, Ronnie? Okay, so I am joined today by two of my very good friends from high school. We actually have a little Facebook group. We've got Catherine in there as well. Catherine and Shelly do not appear in my book Trauma Bonded at all because seriously, if I wrote all of the friends in, it would have been like a 6,000 page book with all of our backstories because y'all, we have some shit going down in our lives, right? But we have a little high school friends group messenger thing. We are talking almost daily, aren't we?
I would say so.
If I don't hear from you guys, like in like 3 days, I do everybody okay?
A life check.
Yes. Sound off. Everyone there? You alive and okay?
Yeah, she does.
Yes, she does. So, Shelly, if it's more comfortable, you can actually pick that up. Yeah, you do
Okay.
not have to like lean in and break your back on these mics. Yeah, lean in.
Hold it like this,
Okay,
like I'm a little kid.
perfect.
Whatever works to make you make out with that thing.
It's such a sexy mic. Just hold it like this. Hold the
it.
butt of the mic.
So I feel weird because I feel like one of the managers at work who sticks his face like that close. And you can't hear anything.
So what I hear Shelly saying is that she is having personal boundary issues with the microphone, despite the fact that she has raised a child with autism.
Basically, yes. I think that I'm the only one in the house with personal boundaries.
That's awesome. All right. So we have gathered together tonight to talk about the dynamic of being accused in a small religious community like Mormonism, where there are very strict rules about human sexuality and engaging in any type of sexual intimacy, how becoming sexually active in a way that is the normal progression of pretty much the majority of the teenagers who have ever walked the earth. How that in this small community changes the dynamic of your life trajectory in an unhealthy way. Like, we're not talking about teens growing naturally into that part of their trials into adulthood and then growing into adults where it's more socially acceptable. We're talking about the trauma of how that works and comparing that a little bit. So for our readers who have read the book Trauma Bonded, you already know, and for those who haven't, spoiler alert, I became sexually active at 16. I did not.
Well, almost.
Let me rephrase. I attempted to become sexually active at age 16. My partner missed the target.
Mistakes were made.
It's very difficult when you are so excited. Yes. I'm sorry, we were dying here. So yes. But because I lived in such a small town and because of my father's over the top intense reaction to the discovery of me becoming sexually active, my little Mormon community here in Snowflake, Arizona, where we are sitting in Taylor, Arizona, the next town over, because if we were recording this in Snowflake, we would all be doomed to hell and lightning would strike the house.
So some of the old ladies in town actually say if you want to be rebellious, you have to be from Taylor. That explains my sister and I.
Oh, I love the old ladies in Snowflake. Yeah. You want to know something?
Me too.
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Ronnie.
No, me too. I'm from Taylor too.
Mm-hmm. Well, no,
Yeah.
You guys were such a bad influence on me.
You're welcome.
It's your fault. Damn it. No, what's really funny. So Jamie in the book, I was walking our neighborhood with Mason while we've been in town on this trip to Snowflake. And Jamie's parents were standing outside. And if you remember from the book, Jamie and I were super close friends until the end of middle school. And then afterwards, she's the one that came into Ed's to tell me something tragic. Read the book if you want to know. And we're pretty certain it was her and another friend that graffitied the high school with my name involved in that graffiti. And so I walked by and I was like, "Hey, how are you? I'm Sarah Lee." Their eyeballs were like, oh my goodness. And I was like, "Yeah, I wrote a book and I wrote about Jamie." And they were like, "Oh, this is not good." And I said, "Don't worry, I changed her name." And her father was like, "I'm sure you have to." And I was like, "Actually, for nonfiction, I don't have to. It's just a courtesy." And he was like, "Oh, thank you."
I'm actually sad you didn't record that.
That I thought about walking with a GoPro, but it's been, anyway. It was hilarious. So video evidence. Alrighty. So anyway, we're here to talk about the experience of teenage pregnancy because Shelly, the rebel here.
Senior project, that's what I tell him. My senior project is now 25 and in the Army and doing amazing. So
he's such a good brother too. Like, he's such a good human.
He is, other than my 4-year-old has learned some creative words from him. It's beautiful. Luckily, we have not said them at daycare or preschool yet. He's actually good at preschool. So, yeah.
So far. I mean, look at his bloodline.
True. Very true.
It's coming. It's coming.
Yeah.
The best teachers are the ones that laugh it off. Like, Abby's principal will call me and say, "So Abby was in my office today and this is what she said." And you can hear the laughter that is being held back. And I'm like, sounds like Abby. And then we hang up. It's like that. I have to inform you because that's the rule because it's still elementary school. And I'm like, in middle school, nobody's going to call me because Abby drops the F-bomb in class. Like, nobody.
Yeah. He hasn't said that yet. I'm waiting. I really am. The one that's probably going to be bad is the baby. She's super sweet right now. So that means that I'm in for it later.
That's awesome. All right. Alrighty. So Shelly, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself? Like, did you grow up Mormon in a Mormon community? What was home life like? Briefly, of course, you do not have to share anything you don't want to share. But tell us a little bit about you, and then we'll dive into all this Mormon rebellion, the sin next to the most serious sin next to murder that you committed successfully and that I committed unsuccessfully.
I feel like it was because the one I chose didn't get excited. No belly buttons were damaged.
No belly. If Michael is listening to this, he's going to die, and I'm okay with that.
Well, he does know me, so it's his own fault.
Well, he's the one who said you could use his real name. He's the one who said you could use his real name.
Yes, he did. In all areas. No, he actually works for me as a social media moderator, and does some other things. Like, he and I are friends, with lots and lots of boundaries, that I work very hard to maintain on a regular basis. And we'll leave it at that.
So I did grow up Mormon. My mom's family is old snowflake Mormon. Like the Flake
Old
family.
ladies.
Like the Flake family. You
I didn't
know
realize
that.
you were a flake.
My grandma was a Flake. That's my
You-
baby's
there's
middle
no-
name is a Flake name.
You are not a flake. Like, that's...
Oh yeah, Christy and I are Flakes.
Okay, they're flakes.
Richardson.
Flakes. Okay, so Snowflake.
Flakes.
So let's just do this. Snowflake, Arizona was founded by a man with the last name of Snow and a man with the last name of Flake. So the Flake family in Snowflake is very flaky.
So,
No, I'm
like
teasing. They're
William
very
Jordan
prominent.
Flake.
Yeah, that's one of my
individuals.
great whatever grandfathers. Yeah.
Oh.
So my dad, however, was an implant because if you're from Snowflake, you also have to import so that you don't have
Incest.
a
Intermarry.
straight family tree. You need some branches. So that's why Christy and I have imported from other places. So my dad,
So true.
I think my dad only did the Mormon stuff so that my mom would let him go on the trips he wanted to, do what he wanted to do. Other than that, if I wanted to miss church, I could get up early enough with him and get on the motorcycle and go. If I slept in, I was stuck.
You were doomed.
I was stuck. My mom...
Your dad was a Jack Mormon.
Yes, he was.
Is that where you got your rebellious streak? Or is-
Probably. But
Yeah,
my
okay.
mom had some secrets that we found out later. I'll tell you one day about all her good secrets.
Oh, we've got to like
She will
spice-
haunt me after this.
Well, I mean, if you want to do it in the microphone, that's up to you. I would suggest talking to your family first. But I feel like we need to get some spice going in our Facebook Messenger book.
I'm gonna. I
group
sold you some
because
spice earlier, so
today.
yeah, you guys.
Oh,
got
I
some
haven't read it
spice.
yet.
Did you not read that?
I haven't read it yet. No,
Sarah.
because I haven't read it yet because I literally, when I sent the messages and then, because I drove, like I have not hardly slept all week because of it. So y'all, my nephew passed away. So I'm actually in Snowflake unexpectedly. And I was like, hey, while I'm here, let's get together. Let's do this thing and whatnot. So I'm here because of a tragedy within the Westbrook family. So I hadn't slept. So I finished all of that stuff. Now I like want to pick this up and start. I'll leave it alone until we're done.
That's like
recording.
another podcast.
Oh man,
But not,
I'll be back in 3 weeks.
Not this subject.
Okay, so I'll be back in 3 weeks. We can do it if you want to. So yeah, I haven't read it yet, but
But it's a good one, but it's not mine to tell.
oh okay. So then we won't do a podcast
No,
about
no,
it.
no. No.
However, I will. Ooh, I can't wait to go into our. This is Sarah's gossip fix right here. Sarah needs the gossip fix. I will go and read. No, I went to sleep and slept for like 5 hours at my in-laws' house. Like I just crashed and I was like, yeah, Mom, I'll come see you and we'll talk. And we talked for like an hour and then I fell asleep. And I was the worst company ever. So,
Probably not. She probably was okay with it.
oh, she had fun with my with her grandkids, with my kiddos. So it's all good. Yeah. All right. So you've got a Mormon mother, a Jack Mormon rebellious father. Mm-hmm. You have a sister who is a prominent figure in the state of Arizona.
Yes, so actually, funny story. Mason did some college classes with my sister.
Uh-oh.
You do know her, Christy.
Christy.
My maiden name is Rivington. She had a little boy in college.
We also knew them because they were stationed in El Paso at the same time that we were in El Paso, and they were in our ward. They came into our ward as we were moving out of, the first ward that we were in El Paso. Then when we bought our house and we moved out of that ward, Christy and her husband, oh goodness, I know his name and it's just slipped my brain. What is your brother? Anyway.
Well, so I like to call him Wheezy, but it's Walt.
Thank you, Walt. Like Walt Whitman. So anyway, Christy and Walt moved into the ward just as we moved into the Hondo Pass ward in El Paso after we had bought our house. So we crossed paths in El Paso as well, very briefly.
Cool. Yeah.
Go Army!
Right? So, yeah.
Awesome. Alrighty. So in my book, Trauma Bonded, one of the phenomenons, that I talk about is that because my dad reacted so over the top, the entire town of Snowflake, or at least from my perspective, the entire town, I'm sure there were several people that have no memory of it at all. I gotta see what you guys are doing over there. They're distracting me. All these squirrels are Shelly's fault.
She's a bad influence.
Sorry.
We've just have not had enough time to like just catch up as friends before we hopped on the microphones here. So anyway, my dad pulled me out of high school. Yeah, my dad pulls me out of. Be quiet, Mason. You're distracting in the background, and nobody can hear your awesome jokes. So, so anyway, my dad pulled me out of high school, and so the assumption was that I was pregnant. And then when I went back the following fall for my junior year, and I didn't show because I wasn't pregnant and subsequently struggled with infertility quite substantially throughout my marriage, the rumor was that I had gotten an abortion because obviously you cannot have a miscarriage or have sex and not get pregnant in the city of Snowflake. Am I being exaggerative or wrong here, y'all?
No, you're pretty correct.
So the other... Oh, go ahead, Ronnie.
I was going to say, you didn't know that your infertility problems were because of that abortion that you had? You just have to ask the people of Snowflake.
Right. I did not know that. And then I also had one person that told me that the reason I struggled with infertility was because I committed the sin of premarital sex with a man I did not marry. And I was like, well, damn it then. And then in my book, well, anyway, read the book. Anyway. Yes, Mason has... Oh, sorry.
So it's interesting because we were just listening to a podcast about Ezra Taft Benson. And one of the things that they said about him in this podcast is that a sister was struggling with infertility, and and asked for a blessing, and he would not give her a blessing because she had been using birth control. And so this was her fault.
As in a rubber condom before they were ready to try to get pregnant. Not like as in... I'm trying to get pregnant and using birth control because I'm a fucking idiot. But we used condoms for family planning, so the prophet of the church refused to give her a blessing, which in Mormonism, those blessings are supposed to heal health issues.
Right. Well, no point being that this is not without precedent, right? So people can say, well, yeah, that's just the people of the church. But that, for you guys growing up, Ezra Taft Benson was before this time and recently before. So it's not without precedent that the leadership kind of teaches these sorts of things that really lead to hurting people.
Yeah, absolutely. Because Benson was talking all kinds of crazy shit from, like, I want to say the 50s and 60s. He was the prophet in 1985 until he died in the mid 1990s. So yeah, he was the prophet that was saying shit like that, Shelly, when you and I were sinning.
That explains so much.
So much.
So much.
Yeah.
So,
all right.
So actually, when I read your book, I had a lot of things that I felt like when you talked about getting baptized, I was like, that wasn't just me. That was not just me. That was like,
say more about that in detail. So spoiler alerts are coming. Please speak about that in as much detail as you are comfortable.
So because my dad was a Jack Mormon, he could not baptize me. One of my older brother, who happened to be on a mission at the time's friends, did it for me. And Before I was told that I was gonna, like, they even did talks and they showed a dirty cloth and a clean cloth, and it's like after you do it, everything's gonna be
here's
clean.
your hug,
And afterwards I was like, well, I'm wet. It was cold. My hair is in knots and my mom's gonna rip it out with no more tangles. And now they're gonna stick oil in my hair. And
Wait, do they don't use oil generally for the Holy Ghost, do they?
I didn't
Well,
realize.
I just want to I want to say something real quick, because I've heard lots of people talk about this, the idea of a dirty cloth, or you're going to get baptized and then you're going to be completely clean, which is completely against
Bleach.
Right. It's completely against the doctrine of the church to begin with. The scripture, the Mormon scripture, is very clear in the fact that what you do before the age of accountability, which is 8 years old, does not account against you. So they're talking about all this cleaning thing and crap, and it's all just a manipulation to get you into this situation and to make you feel good about the situation because you're not dirty.
So I was 8, so I was like, I'm supposed to be clean and pure and feel special, and I don't. I still have the thoughts that I had before, the bad thoughts, the things, and I thought I was broken. Something was wrong with me, because I never asked my family either, because I was like, don't ask mom. Mom will tell, and Christy might say some stuff. And
Right, it's
I'm not
almost
asking
like
the other older sister.
Right, it's like, oh, I didn't feel the Spirit. God must not like me. Hey, head on over to Amazon and buy your copy of Trauma Bonded, a true story of navigating attachments forged in complex PTSD by me, Sarah Westbrook.
The mighty and resilient Merrimack River, carving through the communities of our great region. My name is Linda Lorden, proud president of Merrimack County Savings Bank. And like the river that serves as our namesake, we're a constant yet ever-changing presence. Because to us, it's bigger than banking. It's about powering communities and putting people first. It's about knowing where you came from and where you're going. That's Merrimack style. Visit us at themerrimack.com.
The world's most exciting podcast, home of borders, language, culture. And here he is, New York Times best-selling author and National Radio Hall of Fame inductee, Michael Savage.
I'm Michael Savage, host of the Savage Nation podcast, home of borders, language, and culture. Be here or be nowhere. The Savage Nation podcast.
Catch the Michael Savage podcast on all podcast platforms every Tuesday and every Friday.
Which is really interesting, Mason, because we were having a talk with our sister-in-law yesterday about being saved, and her version of being saved is kind of like, well, yeah, God is just going to choose some good people that he's going to just leave out for whatever reason God has. And I was like, that is terrifying to me, that like, if you're like, basically goodness isn't enough. If it was really, it did not resonate with me at all. But yeah, it speaks to that feeling of, okay, everybody's telling me what I'm going to feel, but that's normal, because in Mormonism you're told what to think too. From the time you're little, you're told what to think. If I'm fighting with my brother, that's Satan getting in the way, rather than I'm just pissed at my brother because he broke the head off my Barbie doll again, type of a thing. Like, I'm not allowed to have normal, natural, emotional responses without the church infiltrating me and interpreting what that means. And then what I have to do, it's like, oh, well, just turn the other cheek, and why don't you just give your brother all of your Barbies so that he can behead them and draw different colors on them, so they're like the Barbie in the show Barbie. Have you seen Barbie? Like the
I have not, but it reminds me of Toy Story and Sid.
Yes, like that. Like, I'm like, oh, I don't want to feel angry because then Satan's here, and Jesus said turn the other cheek. So you ripped the head off of my Malibu Barbie. So here you can have all of my Barbies, behead them, blow them up, draw with colors on them, shoot them with your Nerf guns, and I'll just sit over. Really what happened for me is when I was a kiddo, maybe this is a squirrel, I don't know, but I got so tired of having to forgive my brother for the stupid shit that he was doing that was like, the bullying brother shit, that I stopped playing with quote unquote girl toys, because Joey would take care of, and Joey is a pseudonym, Joey would take care of the Matchbox cars and the race tracks and the things that were important to him. So if I started playing with those types of toys, he wouldn't demolish them. But if I played with my girl toys, he would demolish them. And my dad would find that funny and encourage him to continue to do it. And so I learned to disengage with property in a way that I didn't care about it anymore, because Joey was going to do something with it. And what's really funny is, as adults, and Mason will talk about this, I'll be like, all right, it's time to spring clean. I'm going to throw anything that you guys haven't touched in the last 5 minutes into the trash, because I'm done with all this shit on the floor. Whereas my brother is borderline hoarder. Like, every item in his garage has sentimental value and significant meaning to him. Did you want to say something, Mason, about Mason's like, yeah, I have nothing to say. Sarah definitely is. When I do deep cleaning, Mason has a panic attack, because he's like, I'm going to have to rebuy all that stuff soon. Anyway.
You're not the only one who does that.
Yeah, see, Mason's over here nodding. Do you do that too, Shelly?
Yes.
Oh, that toy has one dog tooth mark on it. It's going in the trash.
Well, and I get that there's a balance there, right? It's not that everything you throw away we have to buy again, because that's certainly not the case. But there are some things that you throw away that we have to buy again. But do I save everything in my house so I don't have to rebuy those things? Like, there's a balance there. One person in the relationship tends to hang on a little too long, and one person in the relationship tends to get rid of it too fast, and you know which is which in ours.
I admit I am sometimes overly exuberant.
No.
In that. All right. So, for those people who have read my book, they're going to know kind of that community response based on my version. How accurate did I portray that thought, Shelly?
It was very accurate. I did get pregnant in high school. Obviously, I just said that a while ago. I remember going to a restaurant with other friends. One of the friends' mom and stepdad owned the Mexican restaurant in town. And a neighbor who had known me since I was a little kid started questioning me and berating me. And my friend's mother was like, hey, you could leave the restaurant if you keep doing this.
Oh, good friend.
So, no, you were very accurate.
Yeah.
There were some good rumors about who the father of my son's father was, because he wasn't from Snowflake, and I didn't feel that they needed to know, because they didn't know him. So I could tell them a name and they would be like, you're lying.
Not their business.
So.
No. In Snowflake, it's everybody's business. Get it right, Mason. Mason, for those that didn't hear it, because Mason, so we actually discovered today that the reason my fourth mic won't work is because the input on my interfacer is defective. So we're going to have to get that replaced. So Mason, if you want to say something in the background, you're going to have to like push me out of the way, knock me off my chair. Yes.
So I
Just
said
like
that so that you would repeat it. But yeah, like the whole idea that it's not their business, right? Whoever the father was, whatever your relationship was, whatever the reasons that you got pregnant, if they don't have any kind of an actual relationship or interest in your life, screw off, right? This is not your business at all. And you haven't earned the right to insert yourself into my life because you think I've done something wrong. But Mormonism is very, very bad at that because Mormons come from this place of moral superiority. It's my right to step in and say, you screwed that up. So who is this? What's going on? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Well, they also come from a place of fear in the sense of if I don't say something and I don't ostracize you, your presence in my child's life could be a contaminant. Because like one of the dynamics for me was afterwards, I went from being, I mean, I think you guys would both agree, I was fairly popular in high school. Yeah, you're like, yeah.
Oh, you want us to respond?
Yes, I was fairly popular in high school. I was one of the popular kids. Outside of the, so there were like two groups of popular kids. maybe 3 groups. You had the Mormon kids that were popular. That was not me. You had the fun-loving, cool, friend to everybody, popular kid. That was me. And then you had the skaters and the druggies. I don't know. Somebody's phone is buzzing. So,
Oh, sorry.
yeah, you're fine. Oh,
No, not mine.
all right. So anyway, when it was discovered that I'd had sex, I lost my, quote unquote, status in that popular, fun-loving group. And it wasn't there were some of the teenagers that did that, but a lot of the friends were like, we are not allowed to hang out with you. We're not allowed to talk to you. We can't be with you. Like, no, you can't join us on our group date for prom or homecoming. And I was no longer dateable material because I was dangerously promiscuous. It was almost like because I'd had a taste of the forbidden fruit, all I would want was to eat more, which is exactly what my dad had taught us growing up, was that if you had sex, you would either hate it or like it so much you could never get enough of it. There was no healthy in between. So that was how I was raised with that. But that came from somewhere because so many people in the community, it was like, oh, you can't be friends with my kid because you're going to teach them and influence them and encourage them to taste the forbidden fruit.
That's true. It's true. But the funny story about the woman who berated me, later her daughter did get pregnant and could not name the father.
Oh.
It was like amazing karma.
Whoops.
Karma is such a bitch.
Well, and it's funny that in these prudish communities, for lack of a better word, we often rail against the things that we struggle with the most. The things that cause the most shame in our lives, we rail against it the most because we don't want to expose our own shame.
Well, and I would say Snowflake in general is a safe community. It is full of good, loving, accepting people. But then you have these little cliques of piousness and prudishness and that cultural phenomenon that it's just kind of like the water's got a little bit of E. coli in it, and everybody occasionally gets touched by that E. coli, but most of the time people are really good and loving and generous and kind. So what else would you like to say about your experience? As you read my book, what was your experience with that?
I did have a couple friends that stuck around, but I mean, it was my senior year, so I switched schools to the academy.
Oh, you went to the bad kids school.
The bad kids school. That is still known as the bad kids school.
Wow.
But I did graduate early, so I did have a diploma when my child was born.
You know what's funny? I graduated early because the social pressure was so high. I didn't want to stay there. Like, I find it really funny that that's actually a pretty common thing. It wasn't because I was super crazy smart. It was because I didn't want to be in school anymore because it wasn't fun because of how much I was ostracized. I'm really glad because like my kids, I've got several kids in high school and they've had some friends that have gotten pregnant and the dynamic is completely different. And I don't know if that's, I wonder how it is now in like Snowflake High School. Like, because we both went to Snowflake High School. It was devastating to get pregnant in high school, in Snowflake High School. But we've got a really good friend. It's not devastating. Like, the kids are like, hey, this is great. You're going to have a baby. What can we do to help? Let's throw you a baby shower. Like, they're not losing social groups and love and acceptance in the way that we did back in the 90s.
So when my oldest was in high school, he had 2 friends and their girlfriends were in that situation, and that's how it was. They were fine, their families were good. We were also in Oklahoma, so maybe it's different there. I don't know. But
Yeah. I wonder what it's like now in Snowflake.
Yeah, it was not the same.
I'll have to do some research on that and report back because I've got enough connections in Snowflake where I would be able to do that and say, hey, how do pregnant mamas, like teenage pregnant mamas, how are they doing in Snowflake? So I think that's something that I will report back on at a future date. So, Ronnie, do you have any thoughts about any of this, like as an observer? Because, you know, we did a podcast with you, so our listeners will have heard that podcast either last week or a couple of weeks ago that we did with you as a book promotion. And so this one will come out probably a couple weeks later. But as an observer of your peer groups who are in that situation, what thoughts do you have with that?
Am I commenting on the 90s or am I commenting on now?
Whatever you prefer. I'm leaving that ball 100% in your court.
That's so kind of you.
You're
That is so
welcome.
kind of you. So I have lots of experiences and I have some instances that I can't share because they're not mine to share.
Absolutely.
But I will say that things are better. People are more supportive, people are more understanding, and things have gotten better than they were in the 90s.
I think a lot of that has come with the governmental push for sex education. Because, y'all, when we were in high school, like, I looked it up. It was illegal. They weren't allowed to talk to us about those types of things in high school. And even today, so when I wrote the book, we had decided, even today in 2023, in the state of Arizona, the sex education is supposed to push for abstinence. But at least the kids are getting it. Whereas, do you remember? I never took a sex ed class in high school. Did you?
We never did. My mom gave me a talk, The Birds and the Bees, and she drew pictures, and I was little and was like, what just happened?
Right.
And that was it. My husband did tell me, he's from Wyoming. He's also 11 years older than me. And he told me that in Cheyenne, they did give the class to them. So.
Wow. What about for you, Ronnie? Do you remember us taking any class like that?
I had
then?
to take, so I did child development classes when I was in school, and they had like a daycare and stuff like that they would run. We had to watch those videos as part of that child development course.
Like in high school? When
Yeah.
you were in high school? Because
Yeah.
I was not allowed to take home ec because those things are the things my Mormon mother should have been teaching me in the home, so I wasn't allowed to take home ec or sewing.
Mrs. Murphy's class, I used a different name rather than her real name.
Yeah, you're
'cause
fine.
We straight up watched like the
Like mama's having babies.
and like here's the egg and here's the model of the sperm and the whole shebang. So I don't
So like we did the scientific eggs and sperm. We did not do safe sex, use a condom.
No.
What to do if you're violated, what to do if you're uncomfortable. No means no. Like, we did not get that. It was, this is how the sperm gets to the egg, but we're not going to talk about the penis entering the vagina at all because the actual act of sexual intercourse is a forbidden topic. Just don't do it. It was like, don't do it. It's bad. Knock it off. But we all got the like overly encyclopedic scientific version.
Yes.
So when I say sex ed, I'm talking not necessarily about biological sex ed. I'm talking about safe sex ed. Go ahead,
No,
Mason.
I didn't get that.
Right. It's interesting that, you know, it's one of those situations where they're making themselves feel a little better because we're talking about sex ed. But who the hell cares how the sperm gets to the egg, and how does it matter at all in understanding or preventing sex? Like, it doesn't do anything for that.
That was the medical, like, pedestal going on there.
That was a statement from the medical community.
Well, yeah, because I mean, if you're going into medicine and what, I mean, obviously, I think it's important for us to understand how those things work. But as a teenager, I'm way more fascinated with sliding a condom on a banana to learn about sex and how all of that works than I would ever be about this little swimmer thing in a race to get to this other little thing that I can't even see. You know, one of the things that I love, have you guys read the book Come As You Are by Emily Nagoski? Okay, it is one of the best books on female sexuality out there. And she talks about, get familiar with your own anatomy by like putting a mirror down there and taking a look at yourself and those types of things, right?
It's like that scene in Fried Green Tomatoes.
I just thought of.
Yes, that would have been considered sinful in the Mormon community. Like anything to discover your actual physical body was off limits until you're married. And in that case, it's get pregnant as soon as possible before you even really know your spouse, because that's good for longevity in marriages.
Well, because looking at your own private parts is only going to lead to sex. Duh, right? I mean, why would you want to get to know yourself?
Self-sex or...
Well, either way, I'm again coming from this prudish organization or society. If you teach that you can't look at yourself, you can't investigate, because obviously if you investigate your own female private parts, obviously you might touch your clitoris and it might feel good, and then that might lead to masturbation, and now suddenly you're in, and then masturbation obviously is going to lead to sex. I mean, once you feel it, you don't want to ever give that up, right? So now you're going to have sex and your whole life has fallen apart because you used a mirror.
That is true, but yeah, no.
But the idea being that instead of talking about the realities of what's going on, or even, hey, this is what can happen and this is why we think it's a good idea that you don't do this, and on all those healthy conversations, instead you just say, no, don't do that. Don't do that kind of stuff because it might lead to bad stuff. Well, talk to me about why it might lead to bad stuff.
Right, absolutely. Well, and again, we're talking about, Shelly, you and I were growing up and experiencing the reality of this in the 90s. So we're coming out of the Spencer W. Kimball, Kimball, Benson, and who wrote Mormon Doctrine? Packer, right? No. McConkie. So Packer, McConkie, where the only appropriate sex is missionary style, because sex is for the man, not the woman. Like, there's actually in our Ronnie's over there like, excuse me, say what? So yes, we were instructed on what was and was not okay in the bedroom, and oral sex in Mormonism for many years was forbidden, as was sexual curiosity within a marriage. So the only kind was missionary sex. It served its purpose of procreating and relieving male tension, and that was pretty much all God was interested in. And they've now said what happens in the bedroom is between the man and the wife, which we got Jesus out of the sex triangle.
I've heard stories of people not even taking their garments off to keep it sacred.
Yeah, I remember when I got married, my bishop, Ronnie's over there gagging you all. This is awesome. If we only had this on video, that's coming soon. But that makes me laugh, because when I got married, my bishop pulled me into his office, and when Mason and I got married, my bishop was a convert, and he was not the bishop from my 16-year-old year. There was a change in bishop there probably around the time at 17 and a half. And so my now new bishop is giving Mason and I counsel, and he was definitely against the Benson, Kimball, Packer, McConkie era of stupidity, because he was like, whatever happens in the bedroom between you and your husband is between you and your husband, as long as you feel like you can... basically, as long as you feel that Jesus would approve. And I know that his message was, it's between you and Mason unless like there's harm to you. But in my 18-year-old brain, because I was 18 and almost 3 months when I married Mason, one of the things that was really interesting, he's like, as long as Jesus can approve. And I took that to mean like, so like Jesus and the angels are watching us. So as long as we're not doing something that offends them, that's really weird. Like it was kind of like, I'm not sure I get this. And then later it took me a little while to interpret, like as I reflect back on that, it was more like, as long as neither of you are being harmed, you're good. But he was not that explicit, because again, we're talking about Mormon bishops. So let's take a quick break
and we'll be right back.
So, Shelly, anything else you'd like to share from your thoughts as you read my book?
So, I never had your dad as a teacher, but I know from my older sister that he was not nice to her. And later in life, she had actually written him a letter, and he replied to her telling her that none of that happened and he was perfect to her.
So wait a minute. You're saying that my narcissistic father gaslit your sister?
A grown woman, yes. When she wrote that, she was grown. She wrote him a letter that told him what he did and how it made her feel, and he discounted her feelings and was like, I was good to you.
Yeah, that does not surprise me. Ronnie, does that surprise you?
No, I was just going to tell Shelly, I'm not sure if she was here when we were doing the other part of the podcast where we were talking about how Sarah's dad had no idea how his actions would impact other people like myself and Mason. And I told them how, I felt like I was a bad friend in parts of the book and stuff. And Mason was like, yeah, because you're like an adult who can look at like your actions and go, oh, I messed up. I should change that. I should do better. But how Sarah's dad is just incapable of looking at his actions from that point of view and being able to see. Am I badly paraphrasing you?
No, that was very well done.
No, I think that was perfect. Yeah, and in this situation, like the grown-up thing to do, if someone sent me a letter and said, "Hey, this is what you did," and I don't have any memory of that, okay, fine. Like it didn't impact me the way that it didn't impact your father, Sarah, the way that it impacted your sister.
Well, and I'm going to interrupt you real quick. The reason it didn't is because for my dad, it was just another work day.
Right.
But for your sister, it changed her educational and academic experiences. Sorry, go ahead, Mace.
Right. And in this situation, the grown-up adult thing to do is to read that letter and go, "Holy crap. That I didn't even realize that what I did impacted someone that way." If that had happened to me, my response would be to sit down and write that letter or call or whatever I felt was appropriate or whatever I had at my disposal. So say all I had was a letter to write and say, I had no idea. I'm really sorry. I did, I didn't mean to do that, or I didn't even realize that was happening, or you know what, I did do that or whatever. But the adult thing to do is to acknowledge that someone else's perspective has value as well, even if I don't see it.
Right. Well, and what motivation would a previous student have in writing their letter? A teacher, we'll just say 20 years later, 10 years later, 15 years, however many years later it is, writing that teacher a letter and saying, this occurred in your classroom, it really hurt me. Like, what does your sister get out of that? It's not like she's on the news. He's not going to get fired. He doesn't even work for the district anymore, right? Like, what is her motivation? Why would there be any reason for her to be dishonest and go out of her way to write him a letter? He hasn't heard from her in eons and eons and eons. And then all of a sudden he gets this letter and he's like, yeah, I didn't do that. I was good to you. And your memory is wrong. But one of the things that's interesting about this to me is that a lot of people, I don't have a relationship with my father because he is very harmful to my kids. And then he tells me he didn't do it. And then he tells me why he did it. But it's all this like rationalization of how righteous and wonderful and amazing he is that he did it. So it's my dad's lack of ability to look at how his actions are impacting others and be accountable and apologize and work to become better. That's why I don't have a relationship with him, because the things he's done to harm my kids would be, for the most part, easily repairable with a genuine apology and a termination of the negative behavior.
So basically, Jesus told him to snatch a chip from your child's mouth.
Well, to take that.
No, it's my fault that he bloodied her lip because I was there when he didn't feel good.
Well,
that's the real story.
And to take this from this one story here to the story that we're talking about here, like to a pregnancy in high school in this kind of a community, the problem there is that there's so much judgment going on that there's no understanding going on. And in that case, he can't see how his actions reflected or affected someone else. Same thing. If I'm coming at you from this self-righteous position that you need to hear what I have to say, regardless of how this affects you, that doesn't matter. You need to hear it. Well, if I can step back and think, no, where are you? Let me find out where you are and see if you're even in a place to care about what I have to say, regardless of whether or not I even have the right to say it.
Yeah, and unfortunately, your sister is not alone in reaching out to my dad. Snowflake is a small community, and it's a small world, and Mormonism is a small world. And in my field, people are like, hey, you were Mormon. Hey, we grew up in the same community. And I don't know these people like that have come to me that I've worked with as clients. Most of them are older than me or substantially younger than me. So it's not a conflict of interest in the sense that I don't know them. But when they hear who my father is, it has now become part of my, because I'm certified, licensed, whatever. I do some life coaching and whatnot with people in states where I do not hold a counseling license. And so there have been some people who have reached out to me because of my understanding of the Snowflake community, the understanding of the Mormon church, and my exit out of Mormonism. But I now in my disclosure say, hey, I was Sarah Lee. I'm the daughter of, and then I give my parents' real names. I'll give the book names here. My parents are Emma and Dave Lee. Those are pseudonyms for my parents. And I want you to know that I do not have a relationship with them, but you need to know this before we begin, because if you were a victim or if you feel like they were innocent, and then there's a discovery later of what my experience is, or I discover what their experience is, it becomes difficult for us to complete that therapeutic or that coaching work. And one of the things that has been very interesting is how many other stories I have heard like that about the people who knew or experienced my dad, especially females in his classroom. So some of the stories that I've heard are things like maybe they were sitting cross-legged in their chair so he could see up their pants, and they were wearing, shorts that were too short, because it wasn't, we were supposed to be in pants for a long time, or our shorts were supposed to go all the way to our knees, like short shorts were a thing and whatnot. But that if they came out of dress code, he would make them stand up in front of the class so the whole class could see that their dress code was wrong, rather than just saying, hey, you're out of dress code, you need to go to the office and call your parents. He would bring them up to the front of the class and humiliate them. Or in one case, I've been told a story where, my dad worked with this other kid's dad, and my dad wasn't a fan of the other kid's dad, and that kid was giving my dad was a referee, giving him a little bit of lip on the field, and my dad hucked a loogie in his face, and my dad was an adult, and this is a high school kid. Things like that. So when I hear these stories, when people read my book who knew the ugly side of my father, they don't doubt that that's who my father was. And so it's been an interesting journey as I'm speaking out again about the abuse, the emotional and mental abuse that I experienced in my home. How many people are like, I believe you because I had Mr. Lee and this was my experience, or I worked with Mr. Lee and this was my experience. My dad hated special ed, hated it, felt like if your child needed special ed, they should not have been in the public school system at all, period, end of conversation. That was his belief, and he was a principal for 16 years of his education career. Ronnie, you're shaking your head over there. Do you have something you want to say? She's speechless, y'all.
No, I don't even know where to start with any of that. It's all just so wrong, so wrong. And I'm just thinking about back to how I was so brainwashed by him. And I thought he was just the coolest guy and the best teacher. And how come I couldn't have him for a teacher? And now looking back, I'm like, oh, my Lanta. I am so glad that I never had him for a teacher.
Right, because you went to Taylor Elementary and Intermediate as well, right?
No, I was in Snowflake for those grades.
Okay, so you would not have had him because he was.
Yeah,
He taught.
yeah.
He never taught in Snowflake. He always taught in Taylor.
So I went to Taylor, but the end of 5th grade, I begged my parents to send me to Snowflake my 5th grade year so that I could do 6th grade in Snowflake. I'm not sure my teacher was much better because she was a unmarried woman who probably had 50 million cats. I'll tell you her name later.
Okay,
That's another post
She dressed
for the thread.
like Little Miss Bo Peep on Halloween.
okay. I don't remember this because I did all of. My dad refused to teach in the same school that my siblings and I attended, so that's why. So my dad taught mostly 5th and 6th grade. I think he did 1 year of 2nd or 3rd, but most of his time he taught 5th grade. And so he taught at Taylor Elementary and then intermediate when they built the new intermediate school. And then I went to Snowflake. So I went to Highland Primary, and then what is it? Highland Primary, and then the intermediate school, and then junior high, and then high school, all in Snowflake. So
I did have a 3rd
Fascinating.
grade teacher threaten to shoot me one time.
like for real?
For real. We were sitting around the horseshoe table, and it was math. I'm terrible at math. And she was trying to explain how to do something, and my 3rd grade mind could not figure out the way that she was explaining it. And she tried it a couple of times, and the kids around the table were laughing at me. And finally, she leaned over and got in my face and said, "I'm going to shoot you. I'm going to take a gun. I'm going to put it to your head, and I'm going to shoot you."
Oh my gosh. That teacher would be fired so
So
fast.
my mom, of course, flipped out and went to the principal and complained. And it was, "One of my teachers would never do that. Your daughter must be lying."
Gotta love it. I am so like when I look at things like my medical exam that I describe in the book, my first pelvic exam I was 13, 14 years, something like that. They don't do it that way anymore. Like that's like dinosaur age medicine type thing. And that's only the 90s. Like that's not that long ago if you think about it. Things have changed, and I think for the most part in society for the better when it comes for caring for humans.
So my mom was in the medical profession, and when I had my first appointment with the OBGYN, I know what you're talking about because I had one of those, and she did not tell me that was going to happen, and I was like, oh, okay. Because when I got pregnant, I had only ever done anything one time, and I was like, oh, it's fine, I'll be fine. And then I got pregnant, and I was like, oh, I'm being punished. But it wasn't a punishment because my son was a gift.
Right, but more the idea of the doctor is doing this to me to punish me because they didn't explain it to me either, like at all.
Yeah, and then there's just like a room of random strangers looking at you, staring.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, but then my guess is, and I don't know if I'm putting words in your mouth, but I know that by the end of my first pregnancy and delivering, I was like, oh, you're the janitor? Do you need to check my cervix too? Like, who else wants to put their hands up me at this point, right?
By the time I had my oldest son, I believe, because my mom worked at the hospital, so there was a nursing class in my delivery because they had to watch the live birth. And I was just like, I don't really care.
Because you were the daughter of the nurse, it was like, oh, you guys can just do this with my daughter.
And I was 17, so I was like, okay.
Oh no, that's
But
right.
like at that point, I did not care because I had been in labor for so long. I was just like, please just let it be done.
Right, get the baby out of me. Yeah, absolutely.
I am eternally grateful for the fact that my mother is a very open individual, and sometimes she goes into too much detail on stuff.
I learned some things about my body from your mother the few times I was at your house, and she would say things, and then I would talk to you, and I'd be like, is that real? And you're like, yeah, probably. If my mom is saying it, it's most likely real. And I was like, that makes so much sense. Oh my goodness. Because my mom was... You don't talk about, like, even today, if Mason and I are joking about anything to do sexually, she is like, Sarah Elizabeth Lee. I mean Westbrook. And I'm like, yeah, no, mama. It's funny.
So when my mom got older, before she passed away, she started telling my sister and I things, and we were like, thanks for that. Like, the moment we got married, she decided she could tell us things. And
Yes.
we were like, oh, great, awesome.
Thanks, Mom. So funny. So, Shelly, how has your life been impacted because of the social shifts, the ostracization, the judgment, and whatnot? How has that impacted you in the long run?
So for a long time, it bothered me. As I've got older, I really don't care what people think because I'm just,
Right?
I don't care. But in earlier life, I was like 17, I had a child. I had barely turned, he was born a few weeks before I turned 18. And I was like, no guy would want to have me. I remember people telling me to go to the singles ward. And I was like, I have a baby. And it was either leave my child and go to church or go to the church with the 40-year-olds.
Right. And did they make you go to Relief Society after that? Or did you get to still go to Young Women's?
Oh, no, I went to Relief Society once I was pregnant.
Yeah, 'cause me as well. I went to Relief Society once I was sexually active. I wasn't allowed back in Young Women's. I was separated from the youth and had to go to the adult.
Yeah.
And I didn't get pregnant. Like, even after the repentance, that like in Mormonism, the repentance process is supposed to erase the sin. I was never allowed back into Young Women's.
But I do know girls who did that, and they went through the repentance process, and they stayed in Young Women's. But I did not.
Bishop
because-
Brule.
Yeah, that was
Right.
a different bishop, so...
Right.
But I do feel like possibly that was part of why, like, I've, after that, I was like, I'm just going to date older guys because they're okay with me having a kid. So that might be something. Never really looked into it because I've just been like, that's what I am. So
See,
let's
I
go.
always thought it was because salt and pepper is, super sexy.
It is. My husband has quite a bit of it.
So does mine.
Mine too.
Maybe it's because we're all in our 40s.
That could be it. That could be it.
Probably.
Yeah. All right. So do you guys think there's anything else that is important to share? Mason, any last thoughts about teenage pregnancy Mormonism? He's thinking. He's leaning in. He's stealing the microphone.
Thanks for the play-by-play. I just want to... It's almost kind of a disclosure, right? I share my feelings about this stuff. I'm a man. It's a completely different world. Like, if I had been involved in a teenage pregnancy, I would have been treated so much differently than the woman is. And I think it's incredibly unfair. I think that it's getting better, but just so harsh in the way that a woman was treated, and a woman bore the brunt of the suffering or anything else. Like, any man given the opportunity to be pregnant, most of us would be like, screw you. Like, I'm not even, no, thank you. And so we just live a completely different lifestyle, but we make the rules. And I think that it's just important to recognize that that's the case, because that's where we begin as the patriarchal society to actually understand the other half of our world.
So, Mason, how would you have responded to a peer of yours getting pregnant in high school back in the 90s versus how you would think about it today? Like, from your let's talk about your perspective of it when you were a teenager in the 90s, when, for us, for like Shelly and I, if you had known us in high school, how would that have impacted your perception and your treatment of us? Like, would you have dated us? How would that have done things? And then as a Mormon adult making decisions for it, how would that have gone? And then now as I'm no longer a Mormon and I'm working to, unpack and change those perspectives, where are you at now with that idea? Let's see how accurate you get it. We're going to all judge you, just so you know.
Well, first off, that's a very complicated question. I didn't see myself as prudish back then. But looking at myself from this perspective now, I would have been. I think that the easiest way that I can answer that is I didn't know about your relationship with Michael before we got married. It's described in the book that you didn't tell me and the reasons why you didn't tell me. And I do not want to say this, but you were probably right.
Meaning that if you had known that I had attempted sex, but as Shelly so eloquently stated earlier, the target was missed. But at that point, I would have still said that I'd had sex prior to marriage, even though the target had been missed. You most likely would not have continued our relationship. You would have ended it. We would not have gotten married, is what you're saying.
It scares me to say it, but yes, I think that there's a good chance that that's the case. And I just think that's awful. And of course, I can't judge my 22-year-old self at that time by my 46-year-old wisdom. But yeah, it scares me to think that that's the case. I don't think that I would have been that harsh to a friend who had ended up in that situation in high school, but I don't recall that ever happening, and so I don't really know. Whereas today, I feel for some people who end up in that situation. A 16-year-old girl, most of them, they're just not ready to be raising a child. And of course, if they have the support that they need, most of them will do just fine. But as a 15, 16, 17-year-old kid, I certainly wasn't ready to be raising a child. And if I had been in that situation, I wouldn't have walked away from it. But you're just not ready. So I would feel bad for them because they've been pushed into a situation they're not ready for. But I don't think that I would judge them because they're of their bad behavior, quote unquote. And so I feel like I've grown a lot in that situation. But it's just I don't know if that even made sense.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's just, we're talking about cognitive and biological development. I mean, anybody who's ever had a newborn baby, it's overwhelming, it's exhausting, it's difficult. And, when you're in the phase of life where the entire world is supposed to be revolving around you, it's a difficult developmental stage to have somebody else that depends on you for everything. And I would say that most moms, yes, they struggle, but most moms also rise to the occasion and raise amazing human beings quite successfully. I mean, our biology, it's like a growing pain. It stretches the development, but it works. I guess my question for you, Mason, is, what if it was our daughter? What if it was our daughter that came home and said, hey, I'm pregnant? How would you respond to that now versus 3 years ago when you were serving as a Mormon bishop?
Well, first, let me make a comment about, you said that, most mothers rise to the occasion, and I completely agree. And I hate the fact that as a society, we can't seem to celebrate the fact that a mother rose to the occasion. We have to punish them for their quote unquote mistakes that they've made. Instead of celebrating what they become, we punish them for what they were. And I hate that. I don't know if I'm ready to answer your other question. I think that I would be much more understanding. I think that I'm in a place where I would not be as judgmental. If I would like to think that I wouldn't be judgmental at all, but I know myself enough to know that I would struggle not to be somewhat judgmental, partially because kids are stupid. Like, teenagers are stupid. It's not that you think this whole process through and so then you go and make this decision, right? We're stupid as teenagers, and so we put ourselves in situations where we don't really understand the consequences. And so it's hard not to be a little bit judgmental because we're just stupid. But I'd like to think that with my own daughter that I could be understanding, empathetic, and supportive in a way that would not hold judgment.
Meaning that we would need to honor that you also rose to the occasion and embraced something that from the time you were little were taught that it would be the destruction of her life as she knows it.
Yes.
Awesome.
So I will tell you, when I told my dad, he was probably the most supportive parent to me. And he was an amazing grandfather to my son. So he was good. My mom was good. But I mean, my older sister did also get pregnant out of wedlock. She was out of high school, barely, but she did. So I think my parents were like, okay, another one.
Right. They'd had that. That's what happened for me when I left the church with my family. They were like, okay, because all 3 of my siblings left and then 1 came back. So when I left, they were already very well broken in to it, whereas Mason's family is still having a nervous breakdown at times because of it.
Well, I just want to add one more thing, too, is that society sets females up for failure in that situation, right? If we could talk about and normalize the use of birth control, the idea, whatever kind, whether it's, the pill or a condom or whatever, if we could normalize those situations, if it was okay to talk about them, if it was okay to make sure that people were educated about the use, then we would have far less of these situations where you're forced into a situation you're not quite ready for. You're humiliated over something that is nobody else's business. We just, as a society, we set you up for failure. Whereas, again, men just get off scot-free. If you want to be a part of it, cool. And if you don't, well, then you're a schmuck, but nobody cares.
I would actually say in society today, there's a lot more equality and birth control is accepted, but there's still some of these smaller, close-knit religious groups, these fringe groups that they have not yet caught up with the times. I'm really glad, Shelly, that you had the parental support, because where our story differs is I definitely did not have the parental support to be human. Like, we're not talking about events that are abnormal. We're talking about the absolute norm. Your partners, swimmers, made it to the egg. Congratulations. My partner swimmers made it to the top of my belly button. Whoops.
So I do think a lot of it was my dad was not raised Mormon. He was from England. So he was the Church of England. He was a convert.
My grandmother, my Nana, is from the Church of England. That is still, she doesn't really practice, but that is how she identifies as the Church of England.
So
that's awesome.
I'm still very much a Bible-believing Christian at this point in my life.
Right.
I don't see that changing anytime soon. So I just want you to know that it's not being done right. Like this thing of judgment. Like, no. So the fact that Mormons have this attitude, this holier than thou and superiority over people, that's not at all the way that my Jesus would want people to behave. And I would really hope that people who profess to be Christians and believe in my Jesus would embrace that love and that forgiveness and let me help you and let me take care of you.
Right. The Mormon God and the Mormon Jesus are not the Christian God and the Christian Jesus.
No, not at all.
Despite Mormonism's attempts and all the millions of dollars that they are spending on trying to say, hey, we are mainstream Christianity. No, it's vastly different. And the reason they can't see it is because they have not experienced the mainstream Christianity's God and Jesus. I would not identify as Christian at this point because I'm still deciding if Jesus is a historical figure, a mythical figure, or the savior of the world. I just haven't worked all those details out in my mind. People are like, oh, Sarah's atheist. I would say I'm an agnostic humanist at this point. So not necessarily Christian at this point, still searching for answers in where I land post-Mormon. But because of my experience in the counseling room, where I work very hard to identify and understand my clients' perspectives and experiences with a religious figure, I can say, based on what I'm hearing, they are not the same person, people.
No.
At all.
Not even close.
Well, let me describe just a real simple example For those of you that aren't aware, right, of course, there's the Bible, and then Joseph Smith did his own translation of the Bible. In the Sermon on the Mount, and the last part of it, Jesus starts, Matthew chapter 7, starts it by saying, "Judge not that you be not judged." There's a lot to unpack with that kind of a statement, but it seems pretty plain. Don't judge. That's not what you're being asked to do, and it separates you from people. Like, there's a lot you can get from that, but his statement is very plain. Well, in the Mormon Bible, the Joseph Smith translation, it says, "Judge not unrighteously." So the whole concept is changed, and we did a podcast about this in the last season where we talked about this. But yeah, when you say, and this is a hard thing for me to wrap my head around, because I've always felt that Mormon God, of course, is God. Mormon Jesus is Jesus. But it is a very simple example.
Right, Mormon God is the one true God, one true Jesus. The Christians are the ones that have it, quote unquote, wrong. So I just wanted to throw that in, Mason.
Yeah, well, that's not what I meant. What I meant is that they are the same. But this is what I feel is a pretty simple example of how that is changed. Judge not is not the same as judge not unrighteously. And whereas one is basically Jesus saying don't do it, the other is Jesus saying, well, as long as you're doing it the right way, it's okay. Those are completely different.
Thank you for that clarification. I apologize for that interruption. I would say then, too, that Mormons, anytime you ask, well, what does unrighteous judgment look like? Nobody can articulate or define it in a way that makes rational, logical sense. Alrighty, so we are at the about hour and 15-minute mark. Does anybody have anything else that they want to chat about or add to tonight's discussion? So, Shelly, I'm going to ask you the same questions that I asked Veronica that I now don't completely remember, so they probably won't be exactly the same. Maybe I need to write those down. But how do you feel based on, because you've read the book, how do you feel I did on being accurate and truthful to the dynamic of our hometown, to the experiences that we would have had growing up? How did I do?
You were very accurate, actually. So very well.
Well, thank you. Ronnie gave me 99% because I messed up the detail about her going to NPC before she went to NAU. But
Declan was in my grade, not hers, so.
Okay, fair. So I love that. I love that, man. Declan is the one that taught me about the birds and the bees, the non-biological scientific.
Well, in overall, it's the sentiment, of course, not those kind of details that don't matter as much, but it's the sentiment that really you are trying to capture. And so it's awesome that a couple of people who were involved in that situation have said basically that you did a very good job of capturing. Right.
Well, and one of the reasons I ask is because one of my editors, so I think for the scene where the boys, so I'm 6th grade and the boys are constantly snapping my bra and grabbing me and groping me. And my editor's response was like, where was the teacher? What was going on? Why wasn't anybody there? And I was like, they were oblivious to the fact that it was happening right under their noses. What would you say about that, Shelly?
It was almost like they didn't pay attention to it because they were just being boys, and that was what boys did.
Yeah. I also feel like there was a lack of supervision of kids because, we're all Mormon and they're just good kids. So we don't have to worry about them because they're such good kids. So there was a gross lack of adult supervision. I mean, it was also a part of that time and day and age, but I feel like because we were Mormon kids, there was an extra level of, they didn't have to worry about us, which is probably why the teenage pregnancy rate is so damn high in this small community.
Yeah, I literally, after 2nd grade, didn't even have a babysitter. They just were like, go home, have a good time. We'll see you when we get there. I mean, I almost burnt my parents' house down. Twice.
And my kid did that 3 times a couple weeks ago.
I started a grease fire in 2nd grade. Fell asleep with it on. It was awesome.
Nice.
It's almost incredible. It's almost like because
incredible and devastating. Go ahead, Mason.
It's almost like because you believe that the gospel, quote unquote, the gospel is a part of their life, that it completely overrules just normal behavior. And that's just ignorant.
Right,
It's
we're so
just
righteous.
ignorant.
There was also that we're so righteous, and everybody else in this community is so righteous that God is protecting my children, so I don't have to.
Right. Yeah. And it's just ignorant, but it hurts people.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Thank
What
you.
else? Go ahead.
Nope, that's it.
Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We are really excited. We will be interviewing Declan in the near future. So for our listeners, look out for that. I think there's going to be a very different dynamic. You're going to hear. I'm really hoping that Declan's in my relationship, like he and I still, like he's like my big brother. We're like family. His wife and I are, that we just get together. We stay up way too late at night, drinking whiskey and laughing until our sides hurt. It's such a joy to have.
Sinner.
Yeah, you need to drink whiskey with us. Declan actually makes his own, and
You
he
know,
says that
if
I am.
whiskey actually tasted good, I probably would.
It does taste good. You just go slow.
No, if whiskey actually tasted good, I probably would, at least on occasion. Like I really still have no interest in drinking alcohol, but if it tasted good, I would drink occasionally. It just doesn't taste good.
No, Declan makes his own, and he gave me a taste of it, and I did not flinch at all. I didn't pucker or anything when I sipped it, and he's like, all right, you're definitely family because you could drink that without a shiver down your spine. And I was like, oh no, the shiver was there. I just didn't let you see it. But yeah. Anyway, so really, really looking forward to that. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we will see you next time. Unpacking Mormonism and Other Religious Trauma is hosted by Sarah and Mason Westbrook, produced by Daisy Girl Communications, LLC, and Alex Vidalis. Please join our community on Facebook. Music provided by Musa and John Worthy Music.